Welcome, everybody. Some faces that were here 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago, and some new faces. Thank you for responding in this critical time to a critical topic. We're going to have an exciting hour and a half. And in the meantime, I'm just going to begin by our terms of agreement of how we want to communicate here. I'd like to share them. So, welcome. These webinars are here to support our members and the mission of the ASI. We ask participants to stay connected, stay accountable, sensitive, and skillful when engaging today. We ask that you agree to create and maintain safe space for learning and growth. To that end, let us all refrain from marketing or self-aggrandizing while avoiding inflammatory or deliberately destructive comments. If you want to recommend a relevant and appropriate resource to attendees, please do so in the chat box. With the exception of presenters, ASI will remove participants who engage in harmful activity after one warning. Thank you so much for creating this community with us, for showing up in presence, attunement, and self-awareness. I actually never do this, so I'm going to come out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to share, as well as that text in the chat box, as I always do, I'm going to share a link to the ASI donate button. Funding is what makes all of this possible. And we are not funded in any way except by these webinars. That's what comes in, and the odd person sends a donation when they register. And so I'm just going to put the donate button there for you to choose. And so I'm going to hand this over to Phil.
Thank you, Jack. Welcome, everybody. As most of you know, we had a webinar on this subject that was very well attended, and the response was very heartwarming. People seemed to get a lot of value out of the conversation, and also felt that it was incomplete. It probably always will be incomplete when you think about it. But so we decided to have a sequel. And this time we have two guests with incredibly relevant experience on the ground, having with spiritual response to seriously polarized cultural circumstances, one in Northern Ireland, one in Israel. They're coming to us live from those places today to share. And in Georgie's case, coming from Israel, a fraught one at the moment. And so we're told we may hear alarms, and she may have to leave us, but we'll get to that in a moment. I just feel compelled to say that just in case anybody is feeling that ASI is in any way trying to impose a perspective on the current fraught situation in the US, or feels self-conscious about expressing an opinion that they think might be in the minority, we want to dispel such notions. We recognize that spiritual leaders and teachers might have a variety of responses to what's going on. What we have in common is that we would all presumably seek a spiritual response, and that may take any number of forms, and it's important for us to hear one another's perspective on that. I think we would all agree, if anybody present here would certainly agree, that we're in perilous times, and there's no one clear response to it. And we would also all recognize that the people we care about, our students, our colleagues, our families, Many of them may be in high states of anxiety, worry, fear, and as spiritual leaders, it's incumbent upon us to do our best to respond to those circumstances. So we thought we'd begin by hearing from Wallace Huey in Northern Ireland, who's got a wealth of experience with the Troubles to share with us. And we'll leave it to Wallace and then subsequently Georgie to open the floor to conversation and questions. So Wallace, please take it away.
Well, I know the ASI is a global organization, and its calling is for spiritual leaders globally, but I'm also aware that most of them are from the USA, and it's to those people in particular I want to address this. I remember when I was 14, I might get a bit emotional here because it's all very personal to me. When I was 14-year-old child, sitting on a grass bank on a holiday, looking through a neighbor's lounge window and seeing violence breaking out where I lived on their TV through the glass window. And I thought, what the hell's that about? And that was the start of the Troubles. It started in the streets around where I live. It started with petrol bombs, and then the army were brought in, and then the army, in their wisdom, opened up on people with lead bullets, which didn't go down too well. With the population, and things went rapidly downhill from there. So, but there's a backstory to what happened when I was 14, and that is 400 years of conflict in Ireland between two polarized camps, the Unionists who wanted to unite with the UK and the Nationalists who didn't. And there's also a religious dimension in that the Unionists were pretty much Protestant, and the Catholics and the Nationalists were pretty much Catholic. So it was a heady mix of religion, nationalism, and conflict. And Jack would have some experience of this as well, since she's Irish, although she didn't live in Northern Ireland, that part of Ireland where it was at its most intense. Now, for years, this problem persisted, and this is for you, Georgie, as well. It seemed to be insolvable, absolutely insolvable. But I was involved at that time with people doing, not directly because I was too young, but I was aware of people doing spiritual work with people or personal development work in small groups in Northern Ireland where the Troubles were at their most intense. And these people worked away for years developing people's consciousness, raising their awareness and their appreciation of one another, and acting to build bridges rather than walls, because there were walls being built, just like America. And what actually happened at the end of years of this kind of grassroots work by people like psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, psychotherapists, and spiritual teachers and their like, was they started to build a groundswell of support for some kind of peace, a lasting peace, a negotiated peace. Now, there have been several attempts at this and it all failed, so I'm not trying to pretend this was straightforward or easy. But in the end, the people who really made the difference were the Americans who came in and added big diplomatic guns, to use that term, to the conversation and use their influence at a key moment when this peace building, bridge building was really beginning to gain momentum. And there's a particular senator, George Mitchell, from, I think he's a Democrat, from the American Congress, came over and he negotiated the settlement along with the key political players in Northern Ireland and in the UK, because there's a particular vision held by a man called John Hume about bringing all the protagonists together, the UK government, the Irish government, and the people in Northern Ireland. And the thing that swung it really was this groundswell of people who wanted peace. And what created that was years of grassroots work by really enlightened people who cared enough to give their time freely to bring in consciousness raising activities like drama and workshops and other related activities at the grassroots, and bring these two communities together to meet each other, to understand one another, to support each other, and eventually to love each other, because that's what's happened in Ireland today. So I think it was 1995, on Good Friday, there was the Good Friday Agreement, which was fraught and fought over right up to the last. And then it was agreed at the last minute on Good Friday. And the energy that went through Ireland and the UK and Northern Ireland at that time was incredible. And the agreement was signed, and then it was put into practice. And do you know, since then, the level of violence has sunk and sunk and sunk and sunk till today it's almost non-existent. And I'll tell you how non-existent it is. I was up in County Wicklow for a drive in my lovely electric car, and I arrived at the Peace and Reconciliation Centre for Ireland, which was built to serve all these groups throughout the Troubles. And I arrived at the gates of this centre because I was going to call in a little cafe. I was going to call in and have a cup of coffee and have lunch there and just chat to people. And there's a notice up saying it was now only operational 3 days a week, right? And there's nobody around. And it wasn't a holiday. There's no reason for nobody to be around. And the reason is because it isn't needed. It isn't needed. The Peace and Reconciliation Centre is out of business in Ireland because peace and reconciliation is a normal run of affairs for Ireland and the UK and Northern Ireland today. And so that's my little story about Ireland. And this was something which is a history of 400 years of bitter antagonism. So there you go.
Do you want to take questions, Wallace?
Sure, if anybody want to ask a question, yeah.
Wallace, I'm just curious. Are you ordinarily so emotional, or is this particular topic like really poignant? Does it really stir up a lot of emotions in you?
Well, I am quite an emotional, heart-centered person, but this particular topic does because it cuts to the heart of the society I grew up in, the society I'm still living in, and I've got a great life in Ireland now, and there's still, of course, bits of trouble in Ireland, as in every society, but it's no different from any other society, and better than most, I can tell you. So it's quite poignant for me as a subject. Yeah, sure.
Mary
If you could,
Sorry.
folks, use the raise hand icon so we have some sense of order and people aren't just jumping in.
Mary's hand was up there, Mary Schneider.
Okay. Mary?
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I've always wondered, I've never been able to, I'm 50% Irish. I've always wondered, what was the initial thing that started this? Was it because the British wouldn't allow Ireland their autonomy? I've never been able to quite, I know it's 400 years, but what started it?
Well, what started it goes back 400 years, and when the English, in their wisdom, decided to invade Ireland and plant a group of people from Scotland and England into the part of Ireland which today is Northern Ireland, and grant them land and drive out the local Irish people and give them two fingers. And when my family roots are from farms in that area, and I always did wonder why the Protestant farmers always had the best land and the Catholic farmers were up in the hills, scraping a living on the poor land. So that's the root of it. And there's been that animosity for 400 years, dating from that. It's called the plantation, where it's like Israel today, where people are just being driven off their homes, off their homestead, off their home nation, and the land annexed, and this history scrubbed. And that happened in Ireland, and it was never solved, you see. It was never addressed properly. It was always glossed over. Whereas what the Good Friday Agreement did, it went down, down, down into the roots of the problem, into the suffering of the people, and healed it at that level. And they were able to do that because they had people for decades at the grassroots working to bring healing to this polarized community between Catholics and Protestants and nationalists and unionists. And I'm incredibly proud of us Irish, that we can actually be a light for the world, I feel now, And my own service, which I created, my own spiritual teaching service, I have a spiritual path. And the knowledge for it was created in an attic room in Belfast, where I was living, listening to the scampering of people with guns outside, helicopters flying over, searchlights going at night. It was going for days and nights, continuously, relentlessly, getting up, not knowing whether I'd make it to my place of work. Was that car in front of me likely to blow up and blow me to bits as I walked past it? This was the reality I lived in. And I came through my own personal healing journey in that psychological space. And when I came to live in Dublin, I met the person who's become my wife and live in Dublin. I felt moved by the divine, actually, to take my experience and turn it into a spiritual path that could be used worldwide, and for nothing, for free. as a way of helping people address the differences and the stresses and the strains between them, because at the end of the day, this is a personal issue, you know? Like when you're looking at the societal issue, what is society? It's a collection of individuals who either get on or don't get on. So it's a personal issue. So if people can actually resolve their personal differences and create a wider vision of life for themselves and their families, then these kind of problems in society and are given opportunity. That's a very important part of it. These kind of problems in society dissolve over time. They do. And if it goes in the other direction, these problems get much worse, you know.
Annie?
Hi there, Wallace, right? Thank you so much for being here today and bringing with you the energy of your decades of work and the wisdom that has been culled from that and your great heart. But just, I did look up George Mitchell. He's still alive, apparently. And I just want to mention, because it came to me very strongly as you were speaking, in terms of the diplomatic strata, which once again is person to person. It's reaching out. Apparently, and if I'm wrong, please somebody say, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when things were so precipitous, what really ratcheted it down was President Kennedy, doing diplomatic work behind the scenes. I don't think this is a well-known fact, but it just brought to, I grew up very internationally, and my father worked for the government. So that strata was known to me, and the power of that reaching out. Now that's including the spiritual, because we are all spiritual beings, but not avowedly. It was diplomatic in that sense. But I just wanted to share that with you. I didn't know if you knew that, but it just, what you say really substantiates that anecdote as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The other part of that, as I recall, is that the military people around JFK were all ready to go bomb Cuba off the maps, and he resisted that. And, you know, sometimes a better, more sensible leadership is all the difference. I have a question too. Oh, okay. There's a question from Jeff.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Bill. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to add, interesting that you brought up JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis, because I'm a mediator and I work in the political realm. And one of the other things that is not known about JFK and that conflict, which I think also pertains in all of these things in terms of wisdom, is that he contacted every one of the living former presidents during the Cuban Missile Crisis in order to get their wisdom as to what to do in that situation. And partly, I believe, if I'm remembering this right, because the Cuban Missile Crisis was following the Bay of Pigs, where Kennedy listened to his generals, and that was a terrible fiasco. And so he learned he had to consult with the only men on earth who had sat in his seat and could advise him on what to do. And I just think that's a very powerful example of seeking wisdom from one's peers.
Thanks, Jeff. Wallace, I have a question for you. You say in your note to us that you've invited a couple of your colleagues to join us today. And so I would invite them and ask them if they had anything they wanted to add to what Wallace says. Did they join us? Are they here?
You should be here. Linda and Catherine. Are you here?
Catherine,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
here.
I'm here. Yes, hello.
Well, this is an example of Irish modern Ireland and modern UK, because Ireland is part UK and part Irish, you see. And Catherine is from the Catholic background, living in Northern Ireland, and Linda is living in England, you know. So there would have been enmity during the Troubles between people from those backgrounds in some instances. So this is a perfect example of peace in progress. So open up the floor to Linda or Catherine to take your questions about the situation in Ireland and how it was addressed, and maybe how, if you feel like it, how our spiritual path can actually, which is freely available, can actually assist people in polarized societies and polarized situations.
Do you want to go first, Catherine?
Well, I can do, Linda. Hello,
Okay.
everybody. Yeah, so like as Wallace said, I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm from a nationalist background, Catholic background in Northern Ireland. I would have been 16 years old when the Good Friday Agreement came in. And I suppose just at that stage, I was working in a predominantly loyalist area of Northern Ireland. Just, I don't know, I'll give you a bit of background there when it was very heated, because at the time of the introduction of this Good Friday Agreement, it was an extremely volatile situation even then. And it was whether or not this was going to be accepted. And if it wasn't accepted, what did that mean moving forward? We had a ceasefire on, and, you know, I just remember it being really like sort of on a knife's edge about what that would mean, because the Troubles had been shocking up until that time. And then I suppose it was like, how much worse can this get if this all falls apart? So I remember that. I remember being very sort of afraid, but even as I suppose, just if I speak to my own personal experience with that, as a young girl, I, you know, would have came from a family who always would have had, you know, good relationships with neighbours who were of a Protestant background or Unionist background. That probably is what sort of paved my way at being able to go in and kind of working in, at that time it was in Portadown, in quite a loyalist area. And I was able to do it. And I did it with a degree of fear, but maybe a degree of naivety too, when I look back on it now, because like, you know, they were burning out buses. I was being took off a bus while it was being burned out, and still, you know, I was just walking the walk to get to work, you know. So yeah, like what Wallace said, I'm not overly familiar with the sort of everything that went on. I know there was a group of women who came, what were they called, women? There was a group of women, Wallace, like of both communities.
Yeah, the peace women,
yeah,
women who advocated for peace, and they did marvelous work in rallying people around this idea of a negotiated settlement, you know. Yeah.
So I was aware of sort of back, you know, things like that going on, but then it was mostly, as I say, I was only 16, so you know, it was whatever you saw on the news or that at the time. But in terms of like getting involved in Wallace's, with the spiritual path that Wallace has created, I'll just speak a wee bit, I suppose, towards that. Again, it is about challenging, you know, we're all sitting there with our personal challenges or things that hold us back. Maybe we're aware of it, maybe we're not, you know, and I can say that with regard to kind of the workshops and things like that that are on the spiritual path, I facilitate those for people along with Linda. But Linda would facilitate me, say, for example, if I wanted to do something, if life presented a challenge towards me, I felt, right, this is something I need to work on. Wallace has workshops and I would do those. Linda would facilitate for me and vice versa. And we facilitate for other people as well. And I do feel that in completing those kind of workshops, completing that sort of inner work on yourself, you obviously are developing a deeper understanding and tolerance and compassion for other views and things like that. And I suppose I'm just trying to link it back to the topic of what we're talking about here now. You know, I do feel that it would be a worthwhile sort of for just to try it, or, you know, to help people with what they're going through at the minute.
Yes, I would agree. Shall I come in here now?
Please.
Thank you. Okay, so I just have memories of seeing the Troubles in Ireland on television. I wasn't part of it. I can't say anything from personal experience because it was not in England, it was in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And even though England is part of, Northern Ireland is part of the UK, I was kind of protected from it. But about 3 years ago, I met Wallace and I joined his spiritual path, and I thought it was absolutely wonderful. I mean, I go around now with this feeling of unconditional love inside me, and I see everybody as a soul, and that we're all one. And the workshops are so valuable. I've done many of them. Wallace has facilitated me, Catherine has facilitated me, and I have facilitated other people, and seen remarkable changes in them, because when they attempt to look at their challenges and use the workshops to help them, they just have breakthroughs, and they see things that they didn't see before. They become very aware and have wonderful insights. And some people have projects that they are developing because of the spiritual path. And of course, you can't help but love Wallace because he's such an amazing man. And I'm not quite sure what else to say, but I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
There's a question. Thank you both, Linda and Catherine. Stay tuned. There may be questions for you. Sid,
Okay.
we can call on you now.
Hi, everybody. What a treat to be here with Wallace and my friend Georgie, and so many of you, and many of you who are have been leaders for me in this spiritual journey of opening to love and oneness. And that's just what I wanted to point to. What I'm hearing in Wallace and our friends so far is that I'm wondering about it like a discernment, like as we in Ireland and Israel and the United States right now, so many of us are feeling hurt, and in the past in Ireland, shocked and angry. And then what's our response? In our response to that, even in this discussion, I'm hearing that what's the difference between the spiritual response and kind of the healing therapeutic one, like with the Peace and Reconciliation Center? Because I mean, I've spent hours sitting with Jack, and we know the place of just the possibility of seeing just the beauty of what is, the love of what is, from the spiritual place of there really isn't a problem, the beauty of what is, and then there's the human that hey, we need to come together, we need to hear their pain, and I'm curious about if there is a sense of that's kind of the two, or if that's really a false division when it comes to dealing with these difficult situations that we're all addressing. And thanks everybody for being here.
Well, I would say there's room and a need for every kind of healing art, including the spiritual. And the spiritual path, as we practice it, is about giving people insight into the challenges they face in their life. That challenge may be a conflict in a relationship. It may be a personal psychological inner challenge, like having peace of mind or something like that. But that by actually, once people get, as Linda says, with the work I do, once people see clearly where their challenge comes from, why it exists, and how they can look at that situation in a more, dare I say it, enlightened way, then what happens so often is those challenges simply start to dissolve and disintegrate. Would you agree with that, Linda? Turn your mic on.
Yes, absolutely, Wallace. They do. They just dissolve away. Yeah.
So the path I have is a path of self-inquiry. It's the people aren't taught anything. In the sense that it's about them discovering what we've got is tools, lots and lots of tools for people to discover who they are, really, their inner world, and what that world is like, and what can nurture it, and what can develop it, and what can bring what we call unshakable inner peace to their life. And as people develop unshakable inner peace within themselves, so that happens in society as well, you know. It starts with you and your relationship with your wife, maybe, then it goes into your family, then it goes into your community, and then it goes into society as a whole. But it all starts with us and seeing the truth of any challenging situation you're in.
Thank you, Wallace. I think we want to start turning it over to Georgie, but there is one question. I just saw a hand. Did it disappear? May have disappeared.
I think it was Liam. It was Liam.
Liam, do you want to come in?
You're muted. We don't hear you.
He's not muted, but we don't hear
Oh.
him. Just check your connection there, Liam.
Now he's disappeared.
He's just checking his connection, I think.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good. Yes, I'm you could say the third musketeer from Wallace's crew today. Younger than the rest. So I've been part of the spiritual path for about 3 years now. I can say I've got no memory of the troubles in Ireland, but I'd just like to say a little piece from myself about my experience of the path so far, because I joined Wallace, it was about 3 years ago now, and I was very much kind of thinking spirituality is a separate piece from the rest of life, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone relates to that, where I would kind of meditate and have experiences and think that this is kind of a separate practice that I do. But from working with Wallace, what I've really learned has been a major turning point in my own kind of internal journey, is realizing that spirituality is very much part and parcel of every aspect of life. And really it is kind of the enveloping perspective on how to see things and approach things. So I just thought I'd just chip in just to say another kind of thumbs up to Wallace and his approach and his practice. It's proved wonders for me, and I hope that it can prove wonders for anyone else interested in America and worldwide.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Liam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we turn it over to Georgie and get the perspective from on the ground in Israel, we forgot to say this earlier. We were sent a petition that was started by Jack Kornfeld, who most of you either know or know about. And he started a petition. It uses the term clergy for spiritual teachers, aka clergy of all kinds. A statement of what might be needed from a spiritual perspective at this time. And he's gathering signatures in hopes of making a broad statement from a interspiritual, interdenominational perspective. The link is in the chat under the ASI from line. You could see it's www.change.org, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Clergy for Justice and Love. At first I thought, well, what does clergy mean? But when I went to sign it, it doesn't say. And it and it doesn't ask you what your affiliation is or anything like that. So we decided, loosely speaking, every member of ASI could be called clergy. So we include the link for you to see if it's something you want to sign and let other people know about. So that's in the chat room. Anything to add to that, Jack or Rick or anybody?
Just like ourselves, Jack Cornfield, in his letter of introduction of this petition, he was saying what we're feeling. If I can speak for, like, what I sensed from the last meeting was that, you know, if we do nothing, if we ignore this, well, we're spiritually bypassing. If we do nothing at all, then we're agreeing with the oppressor somewhere. So, like, what is the right action? What are we called to do? And that's a deep dive within. And so it made my heart sing that Jack Cornfield was taking right action to what I believe I call right action. It's like, okay, he's feeling it too. We need to do something. We need to do something. And this is Jack Cornfield's effort, and I commend it and I support it. But everybody has to choose for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And Wallace has this course that he's developed out of his experience of coming right through a history that came right. And so let's see what Georgie has to say from her own experience of living from a spiritual perspective. And right now, she's in a shelter. Right now, this evening, in Israel.
Yeah, we are in shelters most nights right now. Not that I want to in any way present some great victimhood, but it's quite sleepless to be called again and again into a shelter and to see the devastation that the spoiled Westerner is not really used to, and Israel is quite spoiled Westerner in its mentality, to see buildings coming down. It's easier to dish it out than receive it, it seems. And that's really I'm here, I'm living right now in Glastonbury in England, and I'm here in Israel. I returned to Israel. I was here before for decades to continue educating people in working with trauma from a non-dual perspective, beyond duality, meaning from a spiritual perspective. And at this stage, the group of therapists we're working with we come to a stage in their development where we're really looking deeply into the area of the perpetrator, the trauma of perpetration, the important invitation to move into a deeper responsibility emotionally for the experience of being the bad guy. And so much of our spiritual approach and psychological approach and cultural approach and collective approach is to celebrate victimhood. I think a lot of the attitudes around the Holocaust and the way the Holocaust has been abused backwards and forwards in all directions by everybody is really turning victimhood, the most awful, horrific, direct experience of innocent people, of course all people are innocent, into a currency, into something transactional. It's trying to transform victimhood into a right to exist or a right to have moral, ethical immunity or a certain status. And that seems to be something which is going on globally right now. Who has the greatest injustice, the greatest hardship story, has the greatest right to perpetrate. And this is really a mess for us, I feel, collectively, because our collective failure today to take responsibility for the active principle inside ourselves, the perpetrator inside ourselves, the perpetrator inside each other, means that we're actually competing with suffering. And I'm talking about humans, not the political old men that are, doing an arms industry expo in the sky right now. I'm talking about real people and how they interact. Certain stage in Israel, there was a lot of, this was one of the most deadly moments when there were knifings in the street because it was up close and personal. It was really creating an ethnic divide, whereas normally Arabs and Israelis within Israel proper are living together, peacefully shopping, eating, doing things together, sharing even schools together. And then this started back then with ISIS, this stabbing campaign and this ramming with car campaign. And at a certain stage, the misguided heroism of the civilians would be so strong that I take this a real story of something that happened. A woman was stabbed in the street, and then the people who were running after her attacker trampled her to get the perpetrator. They literally walked all over her to get at the guy, to lynch the guy that did it. Now, how crazy can we get in our perpetration on perpetration on perpetration in the name of victimhood, in terms of sabotaging ourselves? It's a little bit like the child abuse stuff in America, of using that as a political weapon to throw from one party to the other. I don't want to really go out of my lane here, but what about the victims? When we go for the perpetrator, what do we actually leave alone? So what's happening now in Israel very, very strongly is the worst thing ever which could be imagined, the worst nightmare ever, which is what was at first an incredibly unjust accusation of genocide after October the 7th, became little by little genocidal. And they're starving in Gaza, and people in Israel of all persuasions, they find it very, very, very hard to take it in. It's unbearable. It's unbearable to be in the position of being their own worst nightmare. And there is no way around this. I mean, we could easily say, okay, let's look at a worse country. Let's look at Sudan. Let's condemn all of those fascist dictators in Sudan. Or even better still, let's look at Trump. Let's blame Trump. Let's blame all of those Republicans, and let's blame here. Let's blame the oil industry. But it's not going to lead anywhere, is it? What we really, really need to come to is a place where there is the possibility of, in a very honest and sober way, acknowledging the abuser within us, acknowledging that place where we are incredibly selfish, acknowledging that inner greed, acknowledging that place where we do go into murderous thoughts and feelings when we're under pressure, when we're under stress. Now, what I noticed in myself after October the 7th was I was quite okay being on the side of the victim, it was horrific what happened. Half our clinic, everybody was affected by the massacres on that day. But then when on social media I began seeing the response and what was happening in Gaza, I would actually become even more defensive and aggressive and hateful than I was when I was there in the victim position. And I kind of looked at myself, what is this? What am I? I'm sounding like a Nazi. What's going on with me? What's this rage suddenly? I'm becoming right-wing. What happened? It's not my identity. I'm meant to be on the other side. And you could follow it very, very clearly that this very strong, dark feeling of guilt, the unbearability of being the one which is responsible for this suffering, that inner child wound, that place where it can't be that all of this pain and suffering is because of me. That one immediately was going into a fight response, like, oh no, I've got a bullet for every one of them. At the time I was speaking to Rick quite a lot. He helped enormously, and just by having conversations about what was going on. So a lot of Israelis have their real-time thing going on. And then they have this feeling of being accused and made guilty and made into the perpetrator and being invalidated from abroad, which makes them even more right-wing. And at a certain moment, they get to a place where it feels like there's nothing left to lose. And then we get this magic ingredient, which is Trump, who says, throw them all out. He just totally legitimized ethnic cleansing in a moment. And the country's divided like crazy. Half of it's dissociated and gone numb. That's what would have been the left wing. And the other half is thinking, yes, might is right. We were always right. So right now, we're working with students who are in that inner polarization. And we don't need to talk about politics to work with this stuff. It's enough to go out of the level of the mind and opinions and this very strong belief that beliefs somehow decide reality, or that what we think is creating a reality, and to actually go into accepting whatever's being felt in real time, even if what's being felt is very, very unpleasant. To begin to move deeper and deeper into emotional responsibility. So that was the plan for this workshop. The next one starts on Thursday here. Meanwhile, the war with Iran broke out. And what you see now is something else completely. There are these missiles falling and real casualties and buildings coming down and attacks each night. And all those opinions, all of those beliefs just disappear because something else comes online, which is a basic raw humanity of survival. And the strips of population in Israel go Arab, Jew, Arab, Jew, Arab, Jew. There's Arab towns, Jewish towns, Arab towns, Jewish towns. I'm not talking about the Palestinian territories. You can call this the Palestinian territories as well, I don't care, but the population is in strips, Jew, Arab, meaning everybody's getting hit. Meaning it's the same level of fear through all the human bodies which are here that rise up with an alarm. It's the same protection that comes. After a missile falls, people come out of their homes at 4 a.m. and they stand together on the street and they are there for each other, and there isn't a religion in it. There isn't a culture in it. There isn't a bank balance in it. There isn't a gender in it. There is this sheer humanity, and it's extremely awake. It's a very rude awakening, but they do come to that place through that state of shock, in a way, of equalization, which Horace was talking about before. There is something of an awakening happening as well through this horrific scenario. Now, the mind has to catch up. The beliefs have to catch up, because in the background, what's going on there is a lot of people, you can see it's aware, you see them thinking about it after they say something about, okay, we never had it before on our side of the line. They're becoming aware that this is what's been the daily reality over there, that Gaza is blown to pieces, that this is a little bit of what's been dished out remotely. Not by them. A lot of them haven't been there. I mean, they're just living their lives. It's 6 million people here just trying to live their lives. But by the army, by often remote computer systems, like quite dissociated, mindless destruction. So I could go on forever about this, but it is interesting that at the core of the trauma, where the peri-trauma, where the trauma is actually happening in real time, something very awake and alive and essential is online. And as we go out to the outer circles, I go back to England, if we can get out of here at some stage, it gets more and more opinionated, and it gets more and more polarized, and it gets more and more, whose side are you on, and more black and white, and I kill you if you think different from me, and all of this. But right here in the epicenter, there's not such a polarization. Even a very, very right-wing person, if he sees an Arab woman fall over, he'll pick her up. And maybe a very, very left-wing person in the same situation will step over her. There's something else which comes online, which is of the human factor, which has nothing to do with political opinions. So that's where we're at over here at this moment. I'm open to any questions if anyone wants to ask anything about it, as long as we are. Sid.
I want to take the prerogative of going first, because you raised something I was going to ask Wallace about as well. In all the years of looking at these interreligious conflicts, the Catholics and Protestants during the Troubles, the Jews and Arabs in Israel, Hindus and Muslims in India. One thing that always stands out is the stories of just ordinary people who, prior to eruptions, during eruptions, following eruptions, or just living their lives. There's, Hindus and Muslims all over India just going to work together and going to school together and dating and getting married and having friends. And then suddenly they're supposed to be enemies. And I'm hearing that even in Israel now. And it always astonishes that the passion of religious fanaticism of a few people can overwhelm all that natural humanity and erupt in these things where people who would otherwise be pals and associates are forced in many cases to become enemies. And I'm curious how that factors in and what, if anything, can be done.
One of the shocking things is that when you really get close to the religious authorities, at least over here, the rabbinical courts, I was in the rabbinical courts, and I thought, as they were torturing me, that not literally, but like being very unfair to me, that it was all about their beliefs, about extreme ultra-Orthodox beliefs. But by the end of the process, I realized it had nothing to do with that. They were bribed. They didn't even believe in their religious beliefs. So it's got a lot more to do with the abuse of religion for the sake of power and greed than it does by religion in religion itself. And it's the same with a lot of Islamic fundamentalist players. They're not Hamas. A lot of Hamas, they're not religious. They're doing it in the name of Islam, but they're not dressed religious. They're not praying as Muslims in a religious, devoted way.
Yeah.
When they're in politics, it's a kind of rallying flag, like a new kind of nationhood. Also in Judaism, also in Islam. I don't know about Christianity if it's going to become a political thing as well. So
it already is.
Much more, what looks to be much more the challenge is that we still believe that our opinions matter more than what we feel, and more than how we connect, and more than how we treat each other's feelings. We still believe that our beliefs, our opinions create reality. And this is so delusional. It's so psychotic to think that if I believe that elephants are blue, then elephants will be blue. Or if I decide that we must never love here, but only there, then I can control love. It's really delusional. And we are, regardless of religion, we're still very much caught in this mind control aspect where we structure our reality by beliefs, and we can't seem to be able to move beyond that. Meaning, if somebody believes something different, they're threatening our reality. And it's just not true. They are our reality. They are, we exist because of them, and them because of us. We share so much. We're an atmosphere of togetherness. So, to be fair on religion, there are corners all over the place where people are genuinely praying. It's beautiful is religion of Islam. Beautiful, so much for peace, so much for honesty. Judaism as well, and Christianity as well, but they don't make all of that political noise about it because they're not involved with that stuff. But they are there as a sanctuary. There are those little churches all over England where you can go and have the most incredible meditations. There are these corners all over Israel where you can go, little sacred spots, and just blend with something which is beyond this human mess. It's bigger than we are.
There are some hands up. Anybody who hadn't been heard from yet? Linda, is your... No, I guess not. Okay, Sid.
Georgie, I just love the poetry of your words, the deep human, sheer, raw humanity of your words that connect us. Thank you for that. What you said that touched me the most was the story of the stabbing and the crowd that trampled over the victim of the stabbing to get to the person and to string them up. Someone mentioned that many of us are in the United States. 2 days ago, many of us were on the streets protesting, and we were there. In mind, there was lots of anger, and it's like, this is what we're going to do. This is the solution. We're going to change things. But beneath that was, to me, the woman that was being trampled over, our vulnerability, our shock, our powerlessness, our fear. And perhaps even today in this group, the same thing. As we look to solutions, there's that other side of it which you touch for me, and thank you for highlighting that for me.
Thank you, Sid.
Rick?
Yeah, I'm wondering how we find the balance between inner work and outer activism. I remember like 1970, 71, I was a meditator, and I became a meditation teacher during that period. And the Vietnam War was going on, and there were protests on my college campus. And I used to look at these angry protesters and think, these people are contributing to the problem. I've got the solution, meditation. We'll all become peaceful, and we'll have a peaceful world. And I didn't really watch the news in those days because I felt like, I know the solution to all these problems. Why just look at the problems? Fast forward 55 years, and I'm a news junkie, and I post all kinds of political things on Facebook. And just this morning, somebody said, "Why are you posting all these political things? Why don't you just talk about spirituality?" And so Zoltan just posted that quote from Edmund Burke: "The only thing good people need to do for evil to triumph is to do nothing." And of course, the Bhagavad Gita is a story about a warrior being urged to act on the level of actual fighting to solve a problem that wasn't going to be solved by just transcending alone, although the advice was to do both, transcend and then act. So maybe that's the answer to my question, but I'd be interested in people's thoughts on how we find the balance between inner work and outer activism. And maybe it differs from person to person because we all have different dharmas. Maybe some of us should be out there with placards and others should be sitting in a zendo or something. Or both.
I see a hand up. Is that a hand, Mary, or are you just checking the wind? Okay.
I can't find my raise hand thing. Sorry.
Okay.
I can speak to what Rick is talking about a little bit. I was pretty big activist most of my life, and I started marching against the Vietnam War when I was 14. And I continued in that vein for a very, very long time. And then I just hit a certain age and just said, I'm done. I'm passing the baton and I'm not going to do it anymore. I want to come from a place of peace and pro-peace and then I just stopped for a long time. And I just recently wanted to come back. And I thought about my commitment to not being as angst-filled as I used to be and angry about what was happening, etc. And so what I did was I just decided I'm going to come from a place of joy and healing and peace and community and all of these other things that were different from my perspective before. And so I went to that march, and I think the language is important too, because I don't want to call it a protest. I wanted to call it a march. And I went on Saturday, and I went from that perspective, which was very different from my other one. And it was just an incredible experience for me. So.
There is this basic, sorry, I just interject a little bit, and because
Please.
I found this so helpful also in my personal life in fighting a divorce war, and also in everywhere of how to fight, and to fight for something, to fight for peace, to fight for love, to fight for human decency, to fight for integrity, to fight for sanity. this really makes sense. Everything really comes into alignment when we fight for, even to fight for the protection of what's precious. To fight against really leads us to that situation where we stamp on the victim to get the perpetrator. Look at the hostage situation now in Israel. They're so busy trying to get Hamas that they literally killed hostages along the way and left the rest there to rot, and now they're already involved with Iran. So part of the whatever this country is made of collapsed. The morale collapsed in that lack of standing for what's essential, for what matters. And so that's an art of warfare. I think it's Mother Teresa talks about it, and they talk that it's also in some Chinese book of warfare. To stand for something really makes all the difference. It's really like the whole universe is then on our side. And we're standing for it also in the other. It's not like we have enemies then. We stand for truth. It's also, or for peace. It's also for the peace on behalf of the other. It's not any more so much like killing the killers and murdering the murderers and all of this. Madness. Canceling the cancelers.
Thank you, Georgie. Stacy?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting discussion. Just very briefly, I find for myself that my inner work informs what I feel called to do with my outer work, because there's so many potential paths to take. So that's true for me. And also, if I spend too much time and energy fighting against something, I find it very depleting. So I'm very mindful about the level of those type of activities. I really feel that I am much more grounded in my own power when I'm focused on the solution instead of fighting against the problem. Having an inner knowing and inner awareness of what the solution or solutions are and what my particular gifts and skills can contribute to that, and really putting my energy there.
Thank you, Stacy. I see Catherine, one of many Catherines. This is Catherine Schultz.
Yes, I just loved how deep you are going into the meme of crucifixion, for lack of better words, which is the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And the other prong of that, we often will see that dance of victim persecutor and how quickly that can morph, as you're so brilliantly articulating. And there's also the rescuer, and that, the codependent dimensions and all these things that can also creep up with the healers and like can end up being the shadow. And sometimes I need to be rescuing because I haven't really met the victim and I haven't quite met the persecutor. And that crucifixion meme, I started to work with probably in my 20s. I read a book called Eric Burns' games people play. It was the alcoholic game. But I see as I'm raising, I was a mom late in life, and I have a 13-year-old, and it's been fascinating to see the middle school brain and the levels that these trauma drama, it's unbelievable, the trauma drama that they live out. And I kind of remember that myself in middle school, and how my sense is that even globally, if humans are still kind of stuck in almost middle school, if we're still, and then it gets really bad with real weapons and things, as we're seeing. And and as I've engaged with this more, I'm finding that there's a real ruthlessness of presence in the moment, in the conflict, say with my daughter or in the world. And the insistence on and the standing for, the fighting for, win win. And that's where I've kind of come to, is that if you can stand for win-win and be ruthless about it, then that kind of pops and eliminates the crucifixion, and it moves it to the resurrection and moves the energy to solutions, etc. And then there's the piece of, how much energy you have to do it at any particular moment, because there is that pick your battle, kind of thing too. And one other thing I'd say too is that what I'm finding and experiencing is that people of my generation were like, hey, we fought for all this progress. We were in the picket lines, and then standing for the joy. Many of friends and colleagues who are in my age group are saying what you just said of let's go to the rally, but let's demonstrate what we're for. We're for this positive, beautiful, loving energy. So the memes are there, and it's just a matter of like how we're going to play it all out, I think, in the end. But the younger generations, many of them are tuned out. And so some of us are like, well, do they have to relitigate this, or are we relitigating again? Because they're like, on their TikToks, and it's just kind of fascinating too, that piece of it where we're kind of on our way out, and we're like, well, we did a lot to birth this amazing, progressive, multicultural, global country, and now it's being brought back the past 100 years, but yet the young people don't seem to be that, you know, they didn't grow up with having to fight for progress, and I don't think they even really know, what they're losing in certain ways. So, but thank you so much, and I hope you really have a successful journey, however it goes, if you leave or stay, but wish you all the best.
Thank you, Catherine. Apparently Linda's been having trouble finding the hand raise, but she did. So please take it away.
Found it, and I'm grateful. I just want to say something quick. I, at the moment, am a deep well of gratitude. So grateful for this.
We're having trouble with the audio, Linda.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
So I'm very, very grateful. I really feel like a deep well of gratitude. Personally, that's what I am at the moment. This conversation and presentations from Wallace and Georgie and others I feel are so deep, it's perfectly relevant for the moment, in my opinion, and can be so, so helpful. My intention is to share this video once it's available with everyone, pretty much everyone I know. And because I think it's really going to help people clarify how to be with the moment that we're in, especially in the U.S. I was at a demonstration in a small town near Boulder called Longmont on Saturday, and my experience was that it was a mix of, yes, there's anger and this, kind of classic activism, but there was also an incredible sense of people being so happy to be together. And it was just extraordinary, really. The love was palpable. So I just want to mention that. And again, thanks so much for this program.
I should say that we had given some consideration to breaking out into breakout groups, but there's still hands up, and we only have 12 or 13 minutes. So if you've been wondering about that, we'll have to do it another time. Boyan?
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for your talks. It's really opened my perspective on war and what's going on, and yeah, really helped me also be with all that's happening. I think what stood out most for me is, Georgie, your words about opinions and beliefs being like the top layer, and then the conflict bringing the deeper emotions into everyone involved. And to me, that is the essence of our work during war, before war, after war, all the time, just going to that deep place of trauma, of guilt, of shame, whatever it is we're feeling, and helping us all realize we're all human. And that's the
Boyan, could I
solution
ask you
to...
where you are?
I'm in the UK.
Ah.
Yes, not too far from London. But yeah, this recognition that we're all human, we all share the same stories, the same conflicts inside us, the same inner children. That's the solution. And I think until it reaches the level of politicians, the top levels, that everyone wants peace and everyone wants that recognition, that war is inevitable. And until, of course, we can all be different, but ultimately we have to all come together into that understanding. That's my take on it, at least.
Thank you. We have another hand up, and fittingly, it's Wallace. So we come full circle, and in the remaining 10 minutes or so we have, I would invite Wallace and Georgie both to add anything they care to. Go ahead, Wallace. Unmute.
I'd just like to say that I've spent 20 years developing the spiritual path I have. It's done a lot of good work in Ireland. And I'd like to make it available overseas as well, to other parts of the world, to America in particular, given their circumstances, and indeed to Israel. It's all online. There's no cost implication, and you met a couple of the facilitators on the program. There are others. And we can train you to be a facilitator, and it's very easy, because the way it works is it has an online workshop which helps people get a breakthrough in any of the 29 biggest life challenges that people experience. And there's also tools to connect them directly with the divine in their life. So people were asking, how do you know what the right path is? Well, I would answer that by saying, look to your own connection to the divine to guide you. And, because this is readily available, it's been tested for over many years, and it's high quality, and it's online. I'd be very interested to see, is anybody from the ASI outside of Ireland want to get a guided tour of our spiritual path and really understand how it works? And maybe if people were interested, they could report back to other people in the ASI that we have this tool here that's available, for resolving conflict in particular, and for bringing peace to the world through the peace of the individual, because the purpose of the spiritual path is to take people to a place of what we call unshakable inner peace. And that's a peace that nothing will disturb, And so it's available. So if anybody would like to have a guided tour, you've met Linda and Catherine. They'd be very delighted to give you a guided tour, as would I. So
Wallace, why don't you put the a link in the chat, and then anybody who's interested can follow up.
Right. Okay. So it's guided tour of the spiritual path.
Just make it to everyone so people can see it.
Oh, yeah. Wallace. Huey. Wallace. Wallace.
Okay.
Huey.com. HU.
Georgie can
doing
start
that,
talking while
yeah,
he does that.
Georgie,
Yeah.
do you want to add
Okay.
anything?
So maybe it's a nice metaphor I can give from over here. So in the middle of our meditation course yesterday, an alarm went off, and so we all went into the shelter, and we were literally in the middle of meditating. And so one of the students asked, "What do you do when you're in the shelter? You can't see what's going on out there." So we showed them how to go inside and to connect with everybody else that they can know who is here now, in the here and now, in a shelter, or at all in the here and now, anywhere around the world. And like this, there's a network of light that starts up, like a matrix of light from the heart, like jum, 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 jum. And it's incredibly healing and brings an enormous amount of safety. It's almost like a deeper, more resilient dimension of sanity which comes forward. And right now we're in a time where it's all about nations and ethnicities and identities and division and conflict between all of them. And you Americans, you're not Americans, you're human beings. And as Israelis are not Israelis, we're human beings. And partly all of this division and craziness is happening because of the oneness which is emerging, because of the awakening of consciousness where we know that the interdependence of all of us and that there is this oneness. And that's the time not to go into division, but to stand even stronger for the oneness and for the connectivity. So if the bomb shelter is a metaphor for those times in our lives when we feel desperate, persecuted, despairing of the world situation, then let it be that, because from that place, that deep, isolated place, to connect to other points of light, to other people from the heart, to all the people that we love, or all the people that we know need love, it makes all the difference. It's energetic, but it makes all the difference. It makes the unbearable bearable. And also then we build a togetherness, a whole dimension of togetherness, which is indestructible. I'm sorry, I'm a bit preachy, but it's really indestructible to the Trumps and the bumps and the BBs and the schmeebies. I mean, the heebie-jeebies. And we need that. It's our responsibility to access that, to form it. It's partly why I love ASI, because it's doing that digitally as well. So I'll be connecting to all you guys.
We have about 5 minutes if anybody has some final thoughts. Oh, there's a hand up. Linda, do you want to add something?
Well, no, I actually don't need to add anything. That was a mistake.
Oh, okay. No mistakes, Linda. Not around here. Jack, do you want to add anything from the ASI perspective, or any preview or update on what we would do? I would like to invite everybody to please give us feedback on these webinars. We want to hear from you. We want to know what we could do better, what we could do differently, any ideas you have for future webinars, special guests, anything of that sort. Please email us, let us know what you have in mind. And Jack, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, we usually try to have the next one set up in 6 weeks by the time we run this one. And we had to wait and see. We got to see what do we as a community want to do. How do we get from the head and the nervous system reactivity to this global crisis, that 18 inches, that 45 centimeters down into the heart? That's our work. That's us walking the talk. And how do we do that in every moment? When we watch the news, when we go out in the street, how do we do that? And I mean, we're probably all good at doing it individually, because I guess we all have an inner practice. That's why we're spiritual leaders in the first place. We've found something very authentic that's beyond the material. How do we walk our talk now What does that look like now, today? I love the fact that we have, a current experience to draw from, listening to Georgie and how she's holding the light in the middle of a war zone. And Wallace, who has turned it through his spiritual practice, turned it into a set of teachings that we can all participate in. Maybe a small group of ASI members will come together as a group as a result of Wallace's training. There could be a lot of potential there, but all we can do is say, here it is. We can offer opportunities, but as the ASI, we can't mandate anything. All we can do is support each other. And if you have ideas of how we can better support, as Phil said, or how we could move forward with this initiative, then please email us. We'll do what we can, because I know we're in the leadership of the ASI, but this is my dharma. This is my dharma. This is what I do in service. And I don't know what that looks like from week to week. I don't know what that looks like. But it's about listening in the moment. And for me, myself, I love these events because it gives me that community, that sense of a movement, that we want to do things differently. So for myself, I want to keep listening and taking the next steps from there. That's where I'm at. And so I think it's a case of us. Surely isn't that what it is? How do we, like Sid's first question, how does the inner move to the outside? Rick's question, what's the balance between the inner and the political? That's for us individually to figure out. I think none of us can tell each other how to do that. That's an inner discovery, an inner alignment, which help us to walk our talk. And so how can the ASI help us to do that initiative? Whether it's with our students, whether it's dealing with the political crisis, whether it's dealing with our having integrity in our personal relationships. In a way, it's the same inner alignment. How can we become more honest within ourselves? And that's kind of the question I sit in. And the next step of the ASI comes from that space, with my own blind spots, with the blind spots of the board. We're learning as we go. So open to feedback, always.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Special thanks to Georgie and Wallace for giving us their experience and their wisdom. It's really deeply appreciated. And I want to thank all of you for showing up. Honestly, 5-6 months ago, I feared I was going to encounter a great deal of spiritual bypassing among spiritual people. I've been delighted to find that's not the case, at least not nearly to the extent I thought, and that people are on the ground and engaging and as concerned as we need to be at this moment and looking for ways to contribute. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.